Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, once confidently predicted that the US dollar would remain the world's reserve currency for at least 50 years. But what if the economic landscape has shifted so dramatically that even Buffett's prediction is now in jeopardy? The US dollar's purchasing power has plummeted to just 3 cents of its original value, and the Federal Reserve's own educational materials essentially admit the currency's worth is approaching zero. Even more alarming is the silent run on the dollar happening right before our eyes. Let me show you exactly what's happening in our monetary system and what it means for your financial future in a world where the US dollar's dominance is rapidly fading. The US dollar is dying, not because of conspiracy theories, but because of mathematical reality. Since the Federal Reserve was established in 1913, the dollar has lost 97% of its purchasing power. This isn't a slow, manageable decline. It's an accelerating death spiral. If you look at the Federal Reserve's own educational materials, they show a dollar's purchasing power approaching zero, essentially acknowledging the terminal condition of our currency. The critical breaking point came in 2007, when the financial system effectively died, though most Americans didn't realize it. The subsequent financial crisis that became apparent to everyone in 2008 was merely the visible symptom of a deeper monetary collapse. When the dust settled, the system was kept on life support through unprecedented measures: quantitative easing, zero interest rates, and massive bailouts that merely masked the underlying reality. The dollar-based financial system had suffered a fatal blow. This is particularly concerning because we're not merely experiencing normal inflation, we're witnessing the end stages of a fiat currency life cycle. Throughout history, every fiat currency, money backed by nothing but government decree, has eventually returned to its intrinsic value of zero. The US dollar is no exception, despite its privileged position as the world's reserve currency. The mathematical trajectory is clear, and according to economists who study currency life cycles, irreversible. Let's put this into perspective. In 1971, when Nixon severed the final link between the dollar and gold, the average home price in America was around $25,000. Today, that same house costs over $400,000. This isn't because homes have become 16 times better or larger. It's because the dollar has lost massive purchasing power. The same pattern applies to virtually everything Americans buy, from education to healthcare to groceries. To understand why the dollar's decline matters so much, we need to remember what money is supposed to do. Money was created to serve 4 essential functions. It acts as a unit of account, allowing us to measure value across different goods and services. It serves as a medium of exchange, facilitating trade between parties without requiring direct barter. Money functions as a fair unit of payment, ensuring equitable compensation for work performed today. And perhaps most importantly, it should be a store of value, preserving purchasing power over time so that savings maintain their worth for future needs. Sound money, like gold, fulfills all 4 functions reliably. But when the government transitioned to fiat currency, they made it mimic gold's properties while secretly building in a fatal flaw: inflation. This intentional devaluation, typically targeted at around 2% annually, is designed to erode your purchasing power slowly enough that you don't change your behavior or question the system. The transition from sound money to fiat currency wasn't abrupt. It was deliberately gradual to prevent public resistance. In the early 20th century, Americans could use gold coins, silver certificates, and Federal Reserve notes interchangeably. They all circulated simultaneously with equivalent purchasing power. This created the illusion that nothing had changed, as the government methodically removed the convertibility that kept the system honest. By 1933, private gold ownership was banned. By 1964, silver was removed from circulating coins. By 1971, even foreign governments lost their ability to convert dollars to gold. Each step removed accountability from the monetary system, ultimately creating our current reality: a pure, debt-based system with no restraints on currency creation. This is why our national debt has ballooned to over $36 trillion, a figure so enormous it equals over $100,000 for every man, woman, and child in America. Few Americans realize we are experiencing a run on the dollar similar to what occurred in the 1960s before Nixon closed the gold window. Back then, foreign governments were sending dollars back to the U.S. and demanding gold in return, draining America's gold reserves. Today's run looks different but follows the same principle. China and Japan, once the largest buyers of U.S. Treasury bonds, have been steadily selling their holdings since 2012. This is not merely a portfolio adjustment, it's a vote of no confidence in the dollar's future. When the world's major economic powers begin divesting from your currency, it signals a fundamental shift in the global financial order. This selling pressure has forced the Federal Reserve to become the buyer of last resort for U.S. government debt. When foreign buyers disappear, someone must purchase the trillions in new debt created each year to fund government operations. The only entity with unlimited capacity to buy is the Federal Reserve, which creates new dollars electronically to purchase these bonds. This circular process, creating money to buy debt that exists because of previously created money, accelerates the currency's devaluation. Looking at the data, foreign ownership of U.S. Treasury securities has declined significantly. In 2013, foreigners owned about 34% of all U.S. Treasuries. Today, that figure has dropped below $25,000. China's holdings alone have fallen by hundreds of billions of dollars. This trend shows no signs of reversing. In fact, it's accelerating as more countries seek alternatives to dollar-dominated trade. Facing this crisis, the U.S. government is considering drastic measures that would have seemed unthinkable just a decade ago. These proposals reveal just how desperate the situation has become. One such proposal is called the Moral Accords, modeled after the Plaza Accords of the 1980s. This plan would force countries holding U.S. Treasury securities to swap their short-term holdings for century bonds, debt that wouldn't mature for 100 years. Countries refusing to participate would face severe tariffs and potentially lose U.S. security guarantees. This is effectively a form of debt restructuring, a polite term for a soft default. By forcing creditors to accept extremely long-dated bonds at artificially low interest rates, the U.S. would be unilaterally changing the terms of its debt obligations. In the corporate or personal finance world, this would be considered a default event. On the international stage, it's a dangerous gambit that risks accelerating the move away from the dollar. Even more alarming is the proposal to charge foreign countries a user fee for holding U.S. debt. Think about the absurdity of this. Borrowers charge lenders a fee for the privilege of lending them money. This turns the entire concept of debt on its head and signals a financial system in its death throes. The proposal suggests fees of 1 to 2% on foreign-held U.S. Treasuries, which could effectively cancel out the interest payments those holders receive. These measures aren't designed to save the dollar. They're designed to manage its decline while transitioning to a new system. The government knows the dollar's dominance is ending. The question isn't if, but when, and how disruptively this change will occur. Warren Buffett himself has repeatedly warned about the dangerous phenomenon known as a debt spiral, a vicious cycle that becomes nearly impossible to escape once it begins. The United States is now firmly caught in such a spiral. The first stage was rising debt, a condition the U.S. has experienced for decades as government spending consistently exceeded tax revenue. The second stage, higher interest payments, is where we find ourselves today. Interest on the national debt has become the third largest expense in the federal budget, consuming over $600 billion annually, more than the government spends on education, transportation, and medical research combined. The third stage, borrowing more just to cover interest payments, is beginning now. With tax revenues insufficient to cover both government operations and interest payments, new debt must be issued simply to service existing debt. This leads to the fourth stage, an intensifying cycle where each round of borrowing necessitates even more borrowing, creating a mathematical certainty of currency collapse. This spiral leads to a hyperinflationary depression, a scenario where the currency rapidly loses value while the economy simultaneously contracts. This seemingly contradictory economic condition occurs when faith in the currency collapses faster than the new economic activity can be generated. In such an environment, prices soar, even as businesses close and unemployment rises. Historical examples abound, from Weimar Germany to Zimbabwe to, more recently, Venezuela. In each case, the government's attempt to print its way out of debt created an acceleration of currency devaluation that destroyed savings and upended the social order. The US dollar's privileged position as a reserve currency has delayed this outcome, but mathematical reality cannot be permanently suspended. As the dollar system collapses, governments aren't planning to return to sound money. Instead, they're preparing to transition to central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, what can accurately be described as a digital surveillance monetary system. These government-issued digital currencies would be programmable, giving authorities unprecedented control over how, where, and when you can spend your money. CBDC systems could allow for negative interest rates, where your savings automatically lose value over time, essentially punishing you for trying to preserve wealth. They might include expiration dates on currency, forcing you to spend by certain deadlines or lose your money entirely. The system could implement restrictions on purchases based on social credit scores or carbon footprints, dictating what you're allowed to buy based on your behavior or environmental impact. Every transaction you make would be completely trackable, creating a permanent record of your financial life with no privacy whatsoever. Perhaps most concerning, these systems would give authorities the ability to instantly freeze financial assets without judicial review, turning money itself into a tool of social control rather than a neutral medium of exchange. This isn't speculation. Central banks worldwide have explicitly discussed these features in their CBDC research papers. The Federal Reserve has already begun testing its digital dollar prototype, while other major economies like China have rolled out digital yuan pilots affecting millions of citizens. Importantly, these CBDCs would retain all the fatal flaws of fiat currency: unlimited creation, built-in inflation, and no intrinsic value, while adding a new layer of surveillance and control. In this system, your money would no longer be your money. It would be an entry in a government database that could be adjusted, frozen, or erased with a few keystrokes. Even more concerning are proposals to put chips in physical cash, creating a hybrid system where even paper dollars would be trackable. This would eliminate one of the last remaining features of our current system: the privacy of cash transactions, without addressing any of the fundamental problems with the currency itself. Many have looked to cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin as an alternative to failing fiat currencies. While blockchain technology offers important innovations, we must be careful not to fall into another trap. Cryptocurrencies have been allowed, even encouraged, to proliferate while gold and silver prices have been systematically suppressed. This isn't coincidental. Governments and central banks recognize that transitioning directly from cash to CBDCs would face tremendous resistance. By normalizing digital currencies through the private sector first, they create a pathway to their own digital currency systems. This isn't to say all cryptocurrencies are inherently problematic. Some offer genuine innovations and potential protection against currency debasement. However, the risk is in assuming they will be allowed to operate indefinitely outside government control when they become large enough to threaten monetary sovereignty. The key distinction is between permissionless systems that anyone can use without approval and permissioned systems controlled by centralized authorities. CBDCs are firmly in the latter category, giving governments the ability to program money, monitor transactions, and implement social control through financial means. As this transition accelerates, what steps are you taking to preserve your purchasing power and financial freedom? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more analysis of the economic forces shaping our financial future.